Hello and welcome to today's webinar, which is benchmark and comparison studies. So basically today we're going to be looking at comparative and competitive advertising. So mainly looking at the laws surrounding competitive ads and competitive claims you might make, whether that's against your own products or competitors' products. And basically how we're going to augment those studies to make sure you've got the correct evidence you need for those advertising authorities and their code of conduct and whatever they need. So I'll give an overview of everything if I go to the agenda. So I'm going to give you an overview of global advertising standards and the advertising authorities that regulate ad standards in those countries. The laws and legislation relating to comparison claims in particular, so obviously focusing mainly on comparison claims today. Recommendations of consumer research methodology. So obviously in global research, we conduct consumer research. So I'm really going to be talking about consumer research as a whole and how you can use that to get the evidence you need for competitive and comparison claims. We'll look at the analysis of results. So how do we look at those results to know if we can make a claim against a competitor or a new formulation? So I'll be sharing some case studies because that's kind of the best way to show that. And I'll look at some examples of withdrawn advertising claims to do with comparison claims as well, so you know what to avoid. So just to introduce myself, I'm the Regulatory Director at Global Research. So my job is to really focus on any regulations, mainly to do with advertising, but also to do with research, basically anything that could affect our clients and affect the way that we work to make sure that we're giving you the best data possible for whatever you need it for. So I've worked with the company for 8 years now. So I've started off as study manager, managed a lot of studies for lots of different clients internationally. We work with people from startups up to sort of large conglomerates. So I've really understood kind of how to design research and also what kind of regulations people need to know at all stages in terms of product development. So whether it's a startup company that wants to make some claims and has no idea what kind of testing they need, or whether it's kind of those large companies that just want to push through products all the time to make sure they get the claims they need for their advertising. So I like to work with clients kind of on a one-to-one basis mainly when we first start with them, really understand your research objectives and then pass you on to a study manager who will kind of know everything about you inside out, about everything you need for your research, and they'll conduct that research in that way. So I kind of want to start off with an overview of the global FMCG market, fast-moving consumer goods, because when we're talking about competitive advertising or comparison advertising, it's because it's such a competitive market in FMCG. It's, you know, I would just put it on there like how much it's valued, and it's crazy billions amount of money. So it basically means that you really want to make sure you're standing out against your competitors because it's a huge market. Whether that means going straight out and saying you're better than them in your marketing or just making sure the claims you're making stand out. It's just really important to be aware that there is a hugely competitive market essentially. Personal care is kind of the largest one. People have got kind of more disposable income over the last few years, over the last few decades. So we've really seen people want to kind of spend money on themselves and spend time looking after themselves. So I know a lot of you are going to be from the personal care market, and it's where we see most of the claims that we test as mainly cosmetics, because yeah, people have a lot of claims on there they want to make. Obviously, to make your product stand out, you need to have a lot of claims on there. So again, if you're personal care, it's a really fast growing market. It's a great market to be a part of, but you will find that there are a lot of competitors. Asia Pacific has got the largest market share. So if you are a global brand, maybe think about focusing, kind of making sure you're developing products to keep pushing them out in that market. Or maybe if you haven't pushed out the Asia Pacific market yet, you might want to do that. North America, of course, is still, the main market for any personal care. It's the main market for most FMCG. So definitely, if you're not in North America, maybe think about kind of putting your research out there. And that's a really important part about this webinar, because we're looking at what are those kind of laws you need to be aware of, what are the authorities you need to be aware of globally, because, you know, we're in that time in the world now where you kind of want to be a global brand if you're not already. The impact of COVID-19 on FMCG. So obviously there's a lot going on in the world at the moment. We can't kind of ignore that, especially with product development and with advertising. You need to be really aware of what is going on in the world. So obviously it's impacted the entire globe. There's kind of no country left free of any kind of impact of COVID-19. Even if they haven't got many cases, obviously there's the ongoing impact from where you're getting your supply from, for your packaging or your ingredients. Things are getting better. I think we can all see that. I know that for us, a lot of our clients had to put studies on hold at the beginning, and they're able to push those through now. So it's definitely good to see that we're kind of getting through it, but we know that things aren't going to be back to normal anytime soon, when we kind of use that phrase a lot, getting back to normal. So it's definitely be very aware, basically, kind of as you're developing the products. But obviously we did see things like kind of people bulk buying things. So in the FMCG market kind of picture again, there was a lot of people stockpiling certain products. And interestingly, one of those things was nappies, and that's what we do a lot of comparison studies for. It's one of those kind of product types that people like to do comparison marketing on. So they're better than other brands, but also to know where they sit in the market, because obviously to be really confident in the nappies that you're developing and things like that, you want to know how it compares in terms of absorption and everything like that. I'll talk about that in a case study though. So it's just interesting to think that, like, obviously those really competitive products were very much stockpiled. So I think at that point it didn't really matter about the competitive advertising, because everyone just needed those products. So like I said, things are kind of returning a little bit to what we know as normal, but obviously there is going to be impact from COVID-19 on all product development. So to start off with, I want to talk about advertising self-regulation. It's how advertising is regulated, basically, globally. So there are different companies which are self-regulatory organizations that monitor adverts in their own countries. And basically, they're making sure that advertisements are legal, decent, honest, and truthful. So that's kind of the key words. And like I said, that's a global thing. No matter which advertising self-regulatory body you're looking at, that will be their kind of buzzwords in terms of what they're looking for. It basically means that they're making sure that it's fair for your consumers. So the consumers aren't being lied to, being honest to them and saying what the product is, so they can make that informed decision on why to purchase your product. But it's also fair on your competitors. And obviously that's going to be a huge part of today's webinar. You don't want to kind of put out claims out there that aren't true, that are in any way deceiving, because obviously it's not fair on your competitors in your market, and especially if you're making competitive claims against them, or comparative claims against them, because obviously you need to have that data there, otherwise it's really unfair. So there's kind of three parts of the industry for self-regulation, so there's advertisers who pay for the advertising agency is responsible for its form and content, and the media that carry it. So if you're kind of any part of that branch, so whether basically it's your products and you're advertising them, for an advertising agency and you're putting it out there, if you're a platform, it could even be that you're a distributor of a product. So if you think kind of like big beauty websites where you've got a lot of brands on there, they need to be aware of the claims that are on there as well, because obviously everyone's kind of involved in that advertising. If it's your website, you're putting the advert out there, and it's something I think a lot of distributors that we've worked with before haven't really realized it, and sort of thought, oh god, we've never even checked to see if these claims are substantiated on these products, again, especially when it comes to comparative advertising. So something to be really, really aware of. So kind of if you're from any branch of the industry, if you kind of go into any of those kind of categories, be really, really aware of what the advertising authorities in the country that you're selling them in are saying about advertising. Again, always think of those keywords: legal, decent, honest, and truthful. Generally, if you're fitting it in with that, you're okay, but there will be slight changes for each country that you're looking at, and there will be kind of detailed parts of their code of conduct to make sure you've got the right evidence that you need for those claims. They're basically also a platform people to complain to. So whether it's your consumers that have purchased your product or your competitors, again, it might be that you've got a competitive brand and they're like, no, I don't know how they've made that comparison about our product. They've said they're better, but we don't think they are. They might be the people that complain to the advertising authorities, and the advertising authorities will look at your evidence kind of on their behalf or on the consumer's behalf, and make sure everything you've got about your claim is like living up to what you're saying, basically. And if it doesn't, you'll have to get, they'll make you remove your ads, basically, at least in the form that they are shown in. So that's always quite a bit of a misunderstanding as well. Not always, sorry. I've seen cases where it's a misunderstanding, where people think that the advertising authorities will just kind of say, you know, you shouldn't be doing that, but you can carry on doing it if you wish, kind of thing. No, they will make you take down your adverts. And they, in some countries, it could be things like fines. It can be quite messy. Certainly in the US, you see things like lawsuits. So always make sure you've got the evidence that you need behind your claim, and you're aware of what the code of conduct is of the advertising authorities before you put your product out there. So kind of a few things I want to signpost you to, just to give you the overview of self-regulation. I don't want to talk about it too much today. So there's the International Chamber of Commerce. They've got a self-regulatory framework for advertising that countries adopt, and most countries have adopted that framework. So it's a really good place to start, even if it's just to go on their website and go, okay, which countries have adopted the framework? And then you can kind of see what countries are on that list and see if that's the countries that you're advertising in. It basically means that it's kind of everyone's on that same framework. So say if you were advertising in the USA, the UK, Australia, China, and they all had that framework, which I know they do, it means that, you know, the same kind of conduct is going to apply. So it's quite a nice way of homogenizing everything that you need to do for your advertising self-regulation code of conducts, and making sure your adverts are correct in those countries. There's also ICAS, which is the International Council of Advertising Self-Regulation. So they were set up by the European Advertising Standards Alliance, and they're basically everyone is part of the European Advertising Standards Alliance, which is most of Europe. And other countries around the world as well have kind of formed a council, so they can all come together and make sure they're sharing the same values on how they're regulating adverts. And they also put out news as well, which I find really helpful, because if there's any update, they had updates on, say, things like COVID-19. They had updates on when they were kind of telling people to be aware of claims on labels and packaging, as well as kind of on websites. And so you know that every country that's part of that council is going to be on the same page with that kind of thing as well. And again, they've got a list of all their members on there. So really good place to start again. If you want to start thinking about, you know, where your adverts are compliant, you can make sure that any of the territories you're selling your product in are on ICAS. So it's just kind of signposting you guys at the moment. I don't want to talk about ad regulation too much today, but it gives you an overall idea. As I mentioned earlier, obviously the USA is slightly different, and I know that the UAE is a little bit different. So they've got federal organisations that are kind of monitoring adverts, as well as self-regulatory bodies. So be really aware of things like that as well, because obviously if it's federal, you could be going against the law rather than just going against their code of conduct. But obviously that I can really help you on that. If you've got any questions about any of the territories you're selling in and who's regulating the adverts, please feel free to reach out. So I want to talk specifically about comparison claims though today. So I've basically taken this from the ASA website, because obviously I'm in the UK, so it's a bit of an easy place for me to access this kind of information. But please be aware that this will apply to every country. So most countries are the same with self-regulation, like I said. And especially when it comes to comparison claims, the rules are pretty clear. So even though all of this has come from the ASA, please be aware of the same no matter which country you're looking at advertising in. But again, check for kind of details before you start putting your adverts out there. So just to give an overview of what a comparative claim is. So obviously the comparisons generally have the purpose to say it's the quality is better, the price is cheaper, the performance of the product, so it might be goes faster, or the market share, so the best selling or the leading brand, things like that. So not all of them fall into those categories, and some marketers do not name the product or company. So again, if you're saying something like leading brand, you probably aren't. But it falls under a comparison claim. So the minute you start saying things that basically compare you in any form or sense of the word, it falls under comparison claim, and you need to make sure you're following the code of conducts that are out there for comparison marketing. So some comparisons with the marketer's own product, so it could be new and improved formula. And some comparisons are with products or services that are in different sectors or that they do not compete. So again, it's just making yourself aware of if you're making any comparison at all, even if it's not directly with a brand or directly with a product, it will still fall under comparison marketing. So watch out for any superlative claims. So things like best, leading, or cheapest, because actually it's so much harder to substantiate. You need to make sure, you're not just kind of doing a study and saying it's better than this product. You're then saying you're better than everyone on the market. So be really careful when you kind of make claims like that. They can be done, but you just need to be aware of the evidence you need to substantiate those claims. So comparisons with identifiable competitors. I put the example there of Coke and Pepsi because that is obviously something we all know when we think about competitive advertising. That's definitely my go-to. They've done it for decades now. So obviously they're really identifying each other. I don't see this so much in the UK. It's not that common anymore to kind of very kind of state out there, I'm better than that particular brand, because of everything that goes behind it and making sure you have all that evidence. People tend to avoid it. But certainly in the USA, when I've been over to the USA, almost every advert on TV is saying, it's pointing out a brand and saying, we are better, which is kind of a very interesting market. But obviously, once a market has kind of got itself there, in that kind, and the consumers are really used to it, I guess is what I'm trying to say, you kind of have to do it, because otherwise, if you're not doing it, everyone's going to think that you can't live up to those brands, I guess. So it's something to just think about where your marketing might very much change the way you think about comparison advertising as well. So basically they need to be, if you're doing an identifiable claim, it needs to be kind of the exact same purpose. So obviously you can't kind of say, if it was an anti-dandruff shampoo, say Head and Shoulders, you can say, oh, it's better at removing dandruff than Tresemme kind of salon or whatever, anything like that, because that one's not been made to get rid of dandruff. So it's got to be the same kind of product. So they're allowed as long as they're based on objective criteria and are presented in a way that's unlikely to mislead. So obviously you need to say kind of, what the evidence is and how you found that out. So you've got to hold relevant, verifiable and representative evidence. So even if you don't explicitly name a competitor, you do need to be subject to the rules. So even if you're not saying Coke and Pepsi, for example, but if you said this fizzy drink is better than a very popular fizzy drink or something like that, you're kind of really hinting at it. So you still need to really make sure you've got the evidence that you need. The consumers should be able to check the evidence as well. That's really important. So you can't kind of just say, yeah, I've got some evidence about this, it's there, it kind of exists. For some cases, you need to signpost them to the evidence itself. So if you maybe made a claim on your social media to say you're better than a brand, you might want to put a link to maybe a website link, which shows the data in its kind of form, says what the test was, how many people were on the study and everything like that. So yeah, it's really important to make sure you've got all of that information out there for your consumers so that they can make an informed decision on why they're purchasing your product and not that competitor. So unidentifiable competitors as well. So they've got fewer requirements because obviously you're not kind of being so out there and kind of saying what brand you're comparing against, but you still need to do the same thing where you need to make sure that you've got the evidence, you're not misleading your consumers, and everything like that, basically. So you're not kind of hiding information from your consumers at any point. It's basically the same kind of thing, but obviously it's just not as harshly criticized or harshly reviewed because you're not out there naming brands. So just to kind of, I want to bring back to COVID-19, of course. It's just something to be aware of. So all of the advertising regulations globally are basically saying to make sure that you're still obeying their code of conduct, even due to COVID-19. And that really, I just want to point that out because with comparative advertising, we need to make sure we're doing that as well. So especially, for example, if you're manufacturing things like antibacterial hand gel, don't start making comparison claims against other hand gels unless you hold all the evidence. Just because of COVID-19, it's still under the same rules and we still need to make sure we're doing it. So just kind of pointing that out and saying, don't kind of rush to make any kind of rash decisions with your advertising. Make sure you're still following those code of conducts. So I conduct consumer research. So as I mentioned, I'm talking about consumer research today in terms of getting that evidence you need to substantiate your comparison claims. But I just wanted to give an overview of consumer research as well and why people might use it. So generally, the main reason really is for claim substantiation. So whether that's a comparison claim or the product on its own, generally most studies that we're running are for claim substantiation, to make sure you've got the evidence behind your claim to say that, you know, your product says what it does. Obviously, we're looking at perception claims with consumer research. These aren't done in a lab, they're not done under controlled conditions. They're sent to consumers and they give their opinion on it. So they're subjective claims, they're not objective. This is good for most comparison claims, because especially if we go back to that example of Pepsi and Cola, they obviously classically done the taste test. That's like their really well-known kind of comparison marketing they've done. So, you know, can you taste this? Which one do you prefer when it's blind? Pepsi or Cola kind of thing. So that's obviously a consumer claim, because you can't sort of do that in a lab and say, oh, people are going to appreciate this. You need to get that feedback from people. So it's really similar with a lot of comparison claims, because you want to get the consumer's feedback and not what it's supposed to do, essentially, under control conditions. Obviously, there may be cases where you need to have clinical evidence as well. But I can always help you with that. If you've got claims and you're like, I'm not sure what evidence I'm going to need to make this comparison, I'll signpost you if it needs to be clinical. So we're looking at basically new product development a lot of the time. So as well as kind of making those out there claims, it might be when you're developing a product, you kind of want to benchmark it and just see where it sits within the kind of industry. We did it with a foundation brand in Australia. That wanted to say they were as good as the leading mineral kind of foundation makeup. So they didn't even want to say that they were better than them. They just wanted to see if they were as good. And they didn't even do that in their marketing. They just wanted to know where they sit, kind of give themselves, I know, confidence in their brand and say, actually, we know it's going to be as good. It actually came out better. So it does show it's kind of worth doing these tests as well. So it's kind of finding out your benchmark. Things like perceptions. So say, for example, you wanted to launch a brand and you wanted it to be kind of recognized as well as a leading brand. You might compare things like just their branding in an online survey to the brand that you're thinking of. So like, let's do Pepsi and Cola again. You might kind of give a picture of Pepsi, a picture of Cola, and say, which of these would you purchase if you saw it on the shop floor? It's probably not a great example because people really know those brands really well. But like I said, if you had a new brand and you would say you wanted to compare with Estee Lauder because they had a serum, you might kind of do that kind of comparison as well. So don't just think about comparison in terms of advertising. Certainly something, it's a research process. Find out about your brand and how it sits within the market. Could be investigating new markets, so especially if you're looking at geographical locations. So if you're currently selling in the UK and you want to see how your product kind of lives up in the USA, you might want to do your product testing there. Again, could be the product test. It could just be an online questionnaire to get some feedback. Testimonials and reviews, excellent for comparison marketing, because let's go back to that taste test example. Not only are you saying people preferred the flavor, you can get some like testimonials from those consumers and say, oh, I used to think I preferred Pepsi, but actually I tried this and I really preferred the Coke. Then you're getting those kind of testimonials to back up that advertising. And again, packaging design I've kind of touched on already, and price points. So does your brand live up to the price point you want it to, or does it live up to the price point of other products? So we do studies, for example, where we recruit people who already use a certain brand of foundation, or well, it's obviously any product, but let me say foundation again, and then send them the competitor's brand. We might say something like, would you pay the same amount for this as you would your current foundation? Gives you an idea of the price point, especially if you are looking to really kind of go against a competitor. So there's lots of reasons why you might use consumer research, especially for comparison. What kind of examples of advertising have we got when we're looking at comparisons? So obviously I want to look at some direct kind of identifiable comparison claims. So you get some quite funny ones for comparison claims. I quite enjoy them. So you've got BMW and Mercedes. So they're kind of saying not every car can dress up as its favorite superhero. So BMW kind of saying that they're the most favorite BMW brand. They would need some kind of research there to say it's a preferred brand. So it might even just have been a market research to say, you know, which of these cars would you purchase? So it's that kind of idea. I mean, a bit of a different one, but I thought it was quite funny. Wendy's in America going after McDonald's, saying your beef's still frozen, because obviously they had frozen beef and Wendy's have fresh beef. Again, they need to have some kind of evidence to say that. They can't kind of go, oh, I think that McDonald's have got frozen beef. They need to prove that McDonald's has got frozen beef and that they don't. So it's all got to be substantiated to a sense, even if it's not kind of as direct as comparing the product's quality. Other ones on TV, so we've got things like there's a lager there saying that it's, again, directly going against Bud Light and saying that it's got more taste than half the carbs. So again, they have to substantiate that. They would have to have a test to say, you know, what kind of, I don't know about carbs, how you test that. But obviously they'd have to have some kind of research there. I never heard of it, is it Verizon? In America, saying that they obviously have more coverage. So again, they need to have information on that. And one of my favorite advertising campaigns was always Audi going against all the other brands. I'm sure everyone in the UK has seen these, where they kind of say, I like this one, but I also like this one. And obviously you can see they've had to put the taste tests. So it wasn't even saying it's better, it's saying that they also liked it, but they can prove that it's cheaper. So it's quite a tactical comparative advertising campaign, and they did that for a lot of different brands. So I think it's quite a good one, that, because they're just saying that they also prefer it. So now I'm going to take you through some case studies that we've done. So I'll just take a little sip of my drink. So the first one I want to talk about is a natural skincare brand. So it's a world-leading manufacturer of certified natural personal care products. And they were testing a facial oil. So this is to do with new formulation. So I said it might not always be a comparison against a competitor. It might be with your own brand and products. Because it's really important. If you've got a change in your formulation, for example, if you've got a raw ingredient you need to change or anything like that, you need to make sure that it lives up to the formulation you've already got on the market. So this was a dual comparison study, so testing two formulas, and to basically determine if it's accepted as well as their current formulation. So the studies, it was conducted in France and Germany, because that's their largest markets for that product. So obviously we're making sure that, you know, we're basically targeting the people that are already purchasing that formulation. So kind of overview of the legislation. I really want to bring up claims legislation for this one, not necessarily comparison, because in this sense, what they'll be doing is, once they've said that the formulation is as good as their old formulation, they're then going to make the claim that it's a new formula, and that they'll put the claims from the questionnaire into their advertising as well. So they need to make sure they're following that code of conduct about having claim substantiation generally for their product. So I've picked out the Authority for Self-Regulation of Advertising in France, because obviously that's one of their key markets. And they said the advertiser must be able to support its claims by means of evidence that is reliable, objective, and verifiable at the time of advertising. So basically they need to hold evidence before they put their claims on the market. So what was the protocol for this study? So obviously we did it in Germany and France. It was a comparison of two facial oils. It's 2 weeks, it's a week per product. That's all we needed for this one, because we weren't looking at any kind of ongoing benefits. We were just kind of trying to see, you know, kind of first impressions of the product. Is it as good as the old formulation? Even rotation of sample distribution, what does that mean? So this is really common for comparison studies. Basically, it means that half of the participants will get one product to test first, the other half will test the other one first, and then after a week, they're going to switch which product they're using. They'll do an evaluation question after each week. So we're getting that kind of data from them before they've started using the other product, and then we can directly compare the questions. So it'd be something like, my skin feels soft. We would have that question for each product, and then obviously we would be able to compare the data to see which one made the skin softer. So that's basically what even rotation is. We had age 40 plus, because that is the key demographic for this product. We wanted people to currently use facial oils, because obviously it's a facial oil and we want to make sure they're using the same kind of product. They had to have normal, dry and sensitive skin types, because again, that's the key demographic. And they had to currently use natural skincare, because this is a natural skincare brand. So basically, I want to look at the results of the comparison to see how do we determine whether a product is better or not through the data that we have. So really simply, this is taken straight from our report. So we get a breakdown of every single question and a breakdown of what was said for each product. And then we can basically see if there's a significant difference between each product. So after 7 days, my skin feels soft and more supple. So we've got the 2 product codes there. Again, they've been we did this obviously blinded. You need to do that for a comparison study because you don't want them to be influenced by the brand at all or by the packaging. And again, we just kept the codes really vague. So 0016 and 0024, because again, it gives no kind of preference in terms of that either. So we can see what the mean averages are. And we can see underneath it says that there is evidence the 2 samples differ. Now, this is really important because when you're doing a comparison study, you don't want to just go, okay, that's got the highest mean average, that wins, because that's not true. Essentially, there needs to be statistical evidence, say there's enough of a difference between that mean average to say what the winner is. So in the example of this, it says there is. So I go, okay, well, if there is difference, which one is got the higher mean average? So that's 0016. That's got the higher mean average, therefore there is a difference that says that is better at making the skin feeling more soft and supple. So get that for each question. Just because if it says there's no evidence they differ, does not necessarily mean they are as good as each other. It's actually harder to make a claim about a product being as good as the other one. You need more data, essentially. When it comes to comparison claims, the more people you have on your questionnaire, the smaller that marginal difference becomes. So the smaller that kind of bracket set is to say that they get either better than the other or the same as, because there's less variables, basically. We've got more kind of chance of knowing exactly what the opinion is of the consumers. So the bigger the better with comparison studies. We want to make sure that margin is really, really teeny weeny. It's that standard deviation, basically. So that amount of, the amount of kind of mean average that needs to, the amount of points the mean average has to differ by to say that it's a statistical difference. So yeah, the smaller that is, the better, and that can only get smaller by having more participants. That's the only way it works. I hope that made sense. Sorry, I kind of rambled a bit there. So then I want to look at the kind of breakdown of the percentage agreements as well. So we've said which one's better than the other, but we also want to know what had the highest percentage of people say they liked it, what had the higher percentage on each claim. So this has come straight from our report as well. So after we've gone through that massive breakdown of all the questions and if there's a difference between them, we get this lovely distribution of scores on a table. So we have a list on the left-hand side that says what the question was and which product code it is in brackets. We've got the number of people that were satisfied, the number of people that had a neutral response, the number of people not satisfied, and then the percentages of each one. So the percentage of satisfied is really the column that we're looking for when we're looking at claims, because that's the one that we lift out and say 97% of people said my skin feels more soft and supple after using it for 7 days. So it's a lovely claim that we can take straight out and put into our advertising. So basically we've got the breakdown. As I said, I've just picked out a couple of questions for you from that report. So my skin feels more soft and supple, we already had before. Now 0016 had the higher mean average and there was a statistical difference. And we can see that it's got a much higher percentage as well, much higher. 90% is really good anyway for any kind of claim, but it is certainly much higher. So maybe if there was no statistical difference between your products and you were looking at a new formulation, but you went to your percentage table and you thought, actually, there's always a slightly higher percentage on this table, on the table for this, for 0016. So even though it was a statistical difference, let's go with that formulation because we get better claims in our marketing. We can put that all in there. It's got a higher percentage. So it kind of gives you a breakdown there of how you can also use that for your analysis. I want to go over another comparison study as well, because like I said, there's lots of different reasons why we use comparison studies and lots of different types of evidence that you can get. So for this particular study, this is for a nappy pants. So it's a Belgian contract manufacturer that specialise in basically baby hygiene, feminine hygiene, and incontinent adults. So kind of things like nappy pants and things like that. And they wanted to evaluate 4 products. So 3 of them are their own brands, but they want to do it against a benchmark as well. So not only to see which one of their brand, how their brands add up, match up, but also to kind of say this is the benchmark, so they all need to be better. I think that's kind of what I'm trying to say. So they want to know how their new concept performs as well, and they want to compare the claims about leakage, absorption and fit, because they're all obviously the main key points of NAPI studies. So it's a bit of a different one, because instead of looking at your own brands, we've got a benchmark put in there from a competitor, and also we're looking at a test of 4 products. So we're not just doing a direct comparison saying is this one better than that one. We want to get the overall picture of all of these products. So I've taken this specific bit of the code of conduct from the ASA, which is about comparison claims. So basically it means you need a large amount of quite technical evidence. So you need a body of evidence against behind any claim, but particularly when it comes to comparison claims as well. And again, this is what I was saying about having a lot of people on your study. It's not just about that significant difference, but obviously if a competitor complained and said there's been this comparison against my product, where's the evidence say it? And you kind of brought forward and said, well, I've asked 50 people if they think they're better. They probably won't accept that and say that's not enough people to really make such a bold claim. You probably want something, well, at least 100 participants, if not higher, to be able to make that kind of claim. So obviously it's about making sure, again, that we're not misleading the consumers. So again, that's probably not enough evidence for consumers to make a decision and say, yeah, that's the preferred brand, I definitely want to purchase it. So what was the protocol for the study? So this was conducted in the UK. So quadruple placement, because we've got 4 products this time. 28 days, because this time they're using it for a week for each product, but obviously there's 4 different products, so it's 4 weeks. They need they need children who wear nappy pants, obviously, because they don't, if they don't wear them, they're able to kind of assess the parents are able to assess the usage. And then we had a breakdown of the kind of consumers, just to allow us to break down that data even further if we need to. So 25% of the boys who wear a competitor brand, 25% of girls who wear a competitor brand, 25% of the boys who wear the own retail brand, and 25% girls who wear the own retail brand. And it needs to be national if that marketing data is going to be reliable, which basically means we recruited people across the whole of the UK. So it's another table like we've seen earlier, but obviously it's slightly different this time because we have lots of different brands that we're looking at, or 4 different brands we're looking at, rather than just that direct comparison. So this question that I've taken out this time is the absorption capacity of the pants very high. So now we've got, so you can see there's 4 different codes there. So this time we can see our mean averages. And we have got, so if we go down to the 2 key tests, I'll kind of explain what I'm looking at here. So you've got the mean averages, and they're put in order of highest to lowest. And then it says the product means are significantly different if they differ by more than 0.54, blah, blah, blah. Because, so this time, instead of sort of saying directly one's better than the other, because some might be better and some might not be better, we've got a breakdown of that. So basically, because it's 0.5, we know that sample 4 at the top has got that mean average of 4.02, and sample 1 at the bottom has got the mean average of 3.23. That's definitely 0.5 difference. So we know that sample 4 is definitely significantly better than sample 1. However, sample 3, which is just underneath sample 4, it's got 3.78. It's not 0.5 better. So they're not significantly different, but obviously sample 1 is. So it kind of gives you a different analysis. It's something that we kind of break down for you as well. If you do a study with us, we don't expect you to work all of that out. We can kind of do a summary and say which ones are better and which ones are not significantly better. So it's slightly different. So you may find if you're doing a comparison study like this, there'll be claims that some products are better at significantly, some of the other ones are, and it becomes a kind of journey of, right, what are you looking for? Do you need it to be better on every single claim, or do you just need the leakage to be better, the absorption to be better? Because that would be the one that you need to focus on and see which product has won. And again, I just want to bring up that distribution of scores again. So again, we're looking at the question, the pants have good leakage protection, and this time what percentage of people agreed with it. So obviously sample 4, which was higher in our other question as well, has got the highest percentage. You can see that on our satisfied percentage, some of them are asterisked and some of them are not. Now, this is because we basically set in a pass mark to our reports, and it's generally set a 66.66% pass mark because it's a statistical majority. Sorry, I can't think of the word then. Statistical majority have agreed with each claim. But you can set that as you need to. So some people like to set it as 70 for certain advertising platforms like TV. But in this case, it was set as 66. And you can see that samples 1 and 2 didn't even get 66%. So they're kind of out of the range for that claim because they haven't got a statistical majority. So samples 3 and 4 are the ones that we're looking at as competitors now in the kind of claim. And obviously sample 4 has got the highest amount of percentage there. So that's kind of an overview of how we've kind of designed studies for comparison, but obviously it really depends on the claims you're looking to make, and we can certainly help with study design. Don't feel like you're kind of left out on your own there. Some examples of removed comparison adverts. So Ryanair has been slapped down for misleading green claims. So it's basically saying it's the most green airline, and they're saying you have not got the evidence to say that. So I think it's an ongoing argument at the moment. O2, we got into trouble for saying, you know, they're a better network provider, or that they're a cheaper network provider, that they've overpaid for other ones, didn't have the evidence to substantiate it. And Audi, who was saying earlier, I love their TV ads, got in trouble for misleading claims because it's a price comparison again. And they were saying that Tesco's is more expensive, but Audi had their own brand champagne and they used Moët instead of Tesco's own brand. So it's not a direct comparison. It's what I was saying earlier about it has to be a direct comparison. If you're looking at competitor claims, you can't kind of say, okay, we're definitely cheaper because, you know, the kind of price here, it's not their own brand. So it's not a direct comparison at all. So always be really, really careful. When you've got all of your data as well, when you've got all of that comparison data, you need to put it into your product information file or your PIP or your PIF. Obviously, if you work in product development or anything like that, you'll know that you get a product information file which contains everything you need to know about your product, including the safety data and cost listings. But it also needs anything about your claim substantiation as well as any undesirable event data, which obviously you can get for your consumer research as well. So yeah, make sure you've got all of your evidence in there. So especially for your comparison claims, it all needs to be in your product information file. Just a quick overview to say why you should use us, basically. So I've told you about comparison marketing and comparison claims and the evidence you need, but why should you use us to get your evidence? So we're an award-winning research agency. We've won awards for international business and family business. We are compliant with the GDPR and we've got an ISO 27001, which is basically our audit to say that we're compliant. We've got our own data protection officer as well. So it's really important because obviously not only do we have our volunteer data on our system, which makes sure that's anonymized and protect their data, but we've also got yours. We've got your really sensitive information about your products. So we need to make sure we're keeping that safe as well. We have got undesirable event reporting. So as I just mentioned, you need to make sure you have all of that in your product information file. So that's all done in accordance with the Cosmetovigilance Act. So we're basically making sure that the respondents can report an undesirable event at any time, and they've got all the information to do that. It's not really the kind of undesirable event reporting that you would get from a safety test, because obviously we need it to be safety tested before we test it. But it's really important as part of the European Commission that you have some data which shows about the actual use of the product. So not in a laboratory in a patch test, but when the consumers are sent the product to test in their own home, what do they get undesirable events that come up as using it as they actually should. So that's really important to be aware of. We do have product liability insurance as well. Not every research provider does, but they should. So always be really cautious if you are using another research provider to look into that. But it basically means that we're covered. So in that very unlikely event of a serious undesirable event, not only are we covered, but you are also covered. We've got an ISO 9001, which is to do with quality assurance. We're a partner to the Market Research Society. So not only are we all educated and trained in how to properly conduct market research, we have to follow their code of conduct. So you know the research we're providing is ethical as well. We can give you bespoke regulatory advice. So that again is my job. If you've got any questions about regulations, do feel free to reach out to me. And you get a designated study manager. So that's what I mentioned earlier. There is someone that will be your person that you, if you need to ask them anything about your study, and they'll know everything in and out about why you're conducting your research, and any kind of special needs that you have for your research and your processes and procedures. Little bit of further advice before I go to a question and answer. So we always suggest a panel size starting at 100 responses, especially, as I said, for comparison studies, but you might want it to be larger. Again, I can advise on that. You need to let your product liability insurance know that you're conducting consumer studies and using an external supplier. All samples must have been safety tested. It's really important that we're making sure that because we're sending products to the consumers to use in their own home, they need to be at a point where they could be sold on the market, because we don't want them to get any undesirable events that aren't necessary. Always make sure your samples are debranded, especially for comparison studies. We don't want any branding in there unless we're doing a direct comparison of the branding. Questionnaire design should always support your claims, and again, we can help with that. So now I'm going to a question and answer. I'm aware there's quite a lot of information in that. I do my classic thing of talking and talking, but please feel free to write in some questions now and I'll be happy to answer them. Of course, if you don't have any questions kind of that you need to ask right now, you do feel free to email me. So I'll be emailing out the recording. I forgot to say at the beginning, this is being recorded, by the way, and you will be sent the recording once it's over. So you can directly reply to that email if you've got any questions that you don't think of right now, but you'd like to ask later. I'd be happy to help, or if there's any projects you'd like to talk about as well. I'll give that a second longer, but I don't see any questions coming in. Oh, I see that. Any tests for intake product? Can you kind of specify your question there, sorry? For intake product. Say a sensory test. What do you mean by intake product? Sorry. Just so I know. Health food, great. Okay, so yes, you can do tests for any kind of health food, basically. So we do lots of, we can do food studies, but we do things like kind of supplements a lot as well. So we don't tend to do comparison studies for supplements, but what we do tend to do is placebo tests for supplements. That's really, really common, because obviously if it's being ingested, we need to prove that the effects aren't just coming from, say, the participant's diet or anything like that. It needs to come from the actual supplement itself. So basically that's kind of what we usually do for comparison studies. I'm doing a comparison study right now on a supplement, which is for PMS relief. And so we're doing a test against a leading kind of PMS relief product, so like ibuprofen kind of thing, and a placebo, because obviously we need to make sure that it's better. Well, we want to say that it works better than unnatural product relief. But also that it is having an effect, so it's got a placebo in there as well. So we're kind of doing you can do that as well. You can kind of say it's better than a brand, but also it's better, well, that it works, that it's worked against a placebo. I hope that's answered your question, sorry. So for the PMS one, how long does the test go? So if we do that one for an example, because obviously we need people that are having their periods, obviously you get them monthly. So it's a 3-month study, because they're testing one product per period that they have over the 3 months. Again, it really, really varies. So that's quite a specific example, because obviously we need people that are going to test it during their periods. But if we were doing, other kinds of tests, we would always advise the best one. Usually, for example, when I said supplement kind of comparisons, now if it was a normal supplement like a health food one, generally you find that the studies go on for about 3-6 months, because obviously that's how long supplements might take to get a good effect on the participant. And in that case, we wouldn't have the same participants test it, because we don't want to have people use it for 6 months and 6 months. We recruit people on the same criteria and get like a group to test each one, and then we compare the data directly with that. So there's lots of different methodologies that we can advise that. And the result is based on panelist comment only and no technical measurement involved. So like I said, for consumer studies, that's going to be self-assessed by the participants. But obviously there might be some more evidence that you require. So I know we said technical measurement involved. So for example, for the PMS one, that's already had clinical studies. So there's already been clinical information there to say about the effects that the product has. And now we're looking at the consumer perception, which one is actually preferred by the consumer. So like I said, you may find for certain claims you need a body of evidence. And again, I'm really specialist to be able to advise what you need for your product, to be able to go for those, go for those advertising authorities code of conduct. So it really, it's always on a case-by-case basis with consumer studies, or with any study indeed, because it really depends what kind of body of evidence you need there. So yeah, sometimes there's both. Sometimes you have a technical measurement and your consumer perception for the preference. I hope that answers your question. So I'll just leave it a second longer to see if any more questions come in, and then I will finish up. And I've just seen, can you get the PDF file? Yes, I can send this over as a PDF as well. That's no problem. So I'll send that over after. But obviously you'll get the recording as well. Great, I think that's everything. So I'm going to move on just to close the webinar for you. So just to point your direction towards the SCS, which is the Society of Cosmetic Scientists, which we're members of. So they've got their distance learning course, which you can do at any point, which is a recognised course in the Essentials of Cosmetic Science. It's a diploma. So if that's something you're interested in, please take a look at their website and see if you want to sign up. It's something you can do at any time in any part of the world. It doesn't matter if you're not in the UK. There's also going to be the IFSCC Congress, which is going to be in London in September 2022. So hopefully at that point we can all meet up. There won't be any of these cancelled events that we've all been looking forward to. You can register your interest now at the website there as well. So just to close up, here is my contact information. So like I said, I will email over the recording anyway. But if you do want to contact me directly to talk about any projects, or if you've got any questions that you didn't ask today, feel free to. We do have a series of webinars that we've been running weekly for, well, quite a while now, since the beginning of the year. And I always post information about that on our LinkedIn. So please follow us on LinkedIn if you're interested in watching any more of these. Thank you so much for listening to me today. I hope that's been really helpful. And again, I'm always available on chat or anything like that if you need me. Thank you very much and have a great day.